Please join me in welcoming President Gerald Turner. Thank you so much for having us on your campus. Your folks have been great.
Great.
Appreciate your hospitality.
Delighted to have you here, always.
Lovely being here.
Always.
So 18 years as president is a long time. When you got here, the campus looked different, higher ed looked different, the world looked different, and you look different, I suspect. I know 18 years ago I looked different. How is the campus and how is the job of the president of this specific campus materially different from 1995 until today?
Well, I think all of higher education, the honeymoon period of 1,000 years is over.
If there's a honeymoon at all, if you come in as a president today, right?
Well, not today, but I mean for all of higher ed, because like healthcare and other things, waves of change are kind of coming through, so critics who like to write that the whole world is going under move from one topic to another, and we happen to be it right now. But Dallas in general is just so dynamic, and I think the momentum that it's generated, we've been able to be a part of that in ways that I think have been important. And our national footprint certainly grown a lot since then. Issues are a little more complex, but nevertheless, you know, when you say 18 years, it really seems to me like I've been here 7 or 8, but it moves in a hurry.
Time does go fast, and in to some degree, the higher ed universe, where there's been change, it's been on the public side. You know, the public guys tend to act as the shield for all of you in the private side, because when you hear people out in the world talk about, well, I have all this anxiety about higher ed, we need to reform higher ed, they're almost always talking about the public guys, not the private guys.
Well, the people who are knowledgeable know that distinction. Yeah. But I get asked all the time, I mean, even as yesterday, somebody you'd think would know better would say, well, what's your student body made up of? And I say, well, every year we have 2 piles, and we look for 700 Texans and 700 from out of state. And his statement was, oh, so they pay higher tuition if they're out of state.
As if somehow SMU has in-state, and that is, I bet there are a lot of Texas families that wish you had in-state tuition, right?
Well, if we could get the out-of-state ones to pay a lot more, maybe we could.
As the publics have. Yeah. Well, let's go right there. You know, any good conversation about higher ed with the president of a public or private institution pivots off of 3 things: affordability, access, and excellence. No matter who you're talking to, it's about those things. Let's go to the affordability question, and specifically, since you brought it up, the question of cost. I went on your website this morning to double check this. It looks to me that tuition, fees, and room and board all in about $58,000. Is that the number?
For all of it. If you're living on campus and had a regular meal plan.
That, to me, if I do the math, and I'm being generous, is 3 years of UT and A&M or more, right? Yeah. So tell me why, if I'm the parent, I happen to have an 11th grader who came and looked at this very campus last Christmas. I'm now beginning to go through that process. We'll look at some publics and some privates. Why would I think that $58,000 all in to go to SMU is a worthwhile investment, given what I could get for cheaper elsewhere?
Well, compared to the education they get at UT and A&M, it's a real bargain.
Right. You are now officially off of the Powers and Lofton Christmas card list. Let's just acknowledge that.
That's right. You know, basically...
Boy, this is going to be much better than I thought. Okay.
I tell parents all the time that they're asking, I say, basically get a day schedule here. Yeah. Get a day schedule at one of those schools, because Texas is unusual in that one of your biggest competitors is a public institution.
It is.
UT Austin and SMU. For our Texas kids, about 2/3 of them apply both.
And so that's kind of the big this or that.
Yeah.
That's the that.
Yeah, and we're expensive in-state, but we're not out-of-state. And so I tell people that if they're Texans, I mean, we have to have 2 speeches. One, in Texas, we're expensive, but we're worth it. Out of state, we talk about value because we're cheaper than Vanderbilt, Emory, and the other places that we're competing with.
And you're also competitive, Mr. President, you're competitive with Rice and with Trinity and with the other elite private institutions in the state. You're not out of whack with those guys.
No, we're not. And obviously, Rice is Rice. There's only one Rice. And as I tell, as our SATs have gone up so much, people ask, well, what are you trying to be, Rice? And I say, absolutely not. We want to be SMU with the same kind of, to use the term of business, corporate culture that we've always had, even though our SATs are up 150 points and still rising. And that is that entrepreneurial, very outgoing motivated kind of individual that's been a part of Dallas and I think been a part of SMU and really helps to attract a lot of out-of-state students and their families being here. They like that positive nature. So much of the world right now is negative and can't be done. And in Texas and what we try to communicate here at SMU, it can be done. I mean, everything's waiting to be done. It's just a matter of whether or not you've got the initiative and the ingenuity and the opportunities to do it. Come back to the
well, I was about to say,
question.
you come back to the funding because I want to come back to that in a second myself. $58,000 can be justified, and you've talked about a little bit how it gets justified. Is it enough? I've asked implied, is it too much? But if you talk to the people who run public universities, they've obviously got political pressures. That's a burden on them that you don't have. They've got to go begging at the legislature, and they've also got to defend to the legislature and elsewhere any modest increase, even modest increases that they put in to effect with tuition. They'll say that they don't have enough money available to them to do the things they want to do. Do you have enough money available to you, given that price? Or is that too low in your mind?
Well, you can always develop more, develop faster, or whatever else. But we think that if you take a state university system where they're constantly losing out, and they're going to be losing out because all of the federal entitlements and requirements, the percentage of money in any state that's available for higher education is going to continue.
Well, and in fact, the big conversation in the public is that the percentage of funding from the state has gotten to the point now where they may be out of compliance with the constitutional obligation to provide a university of the first class. If you're only giving 8% of the funding to higher ed or 7%, are you really providing anything?
Well, I've been on both sides of that question.
Right, you came from Mississippi,
Oklahoma, Mississippi, and now here, and I started out at a private school, Pepperdine, and after I'd been here about 2 or 3 months, I thought, why in the world did it take me so long to get back
to get out of the publics and into the privates?
Because it was, you have to kill what you eat, but you do get to eat what you kill, So whereas in the publics, they're constantly taking it away from you. And so as a result, being at a private institution, even though you have to charge more, we work very hard for scholarship support and so on. We have on this campus, we have 6,200 undergraduates, 4,800 graduate and professionals, so 11,000 students. But we will have over 1,000 Pell Grant students each year. And
you also have, by my count, about $99 million available in financial aid programs, right?
Yes, and as a result, we work very hard to have a diverse campus. 25% of our whole campus is minority students, 27% undergraduate. And so geographically, religiously, ethnically, racially, we try to be diverse.
And so of the $99 million I mentioned, obviously not all of it is stuff that's SMU administered, some of it is federal, but basically $99 million in financial aid. More than half of it, though, are stuff that you all provide as grants or loans. So how does that tie back into your admissions? I was not able to determine whether your admissions were need blind. Are they need blind? They're not need blind. Okay.
Very few still are. The recession eliminated a lot of schools that were need blind. And so as a result, we do have to look at the whole picture, the financial picture of the person, the family, work, study, all those kinds of things. But what we basically say is if you're admissible to SMU,
we want to figure out a way.
You really want to come here, we will work out a way that you can come here. Some people might say, well, I'm going to go to community college, and we admit 300 transfers a year with those 1,400 undergraduates. And about 170 of them are mainly community college students. About 130 of them are students from around here and some other places. Many of them we probably did admit. They should have come here, but sometimes you have to go off to understand what you left. And so we tell students that we admit from around here in particular that are going off to places we know won't compare well to Dallas.
Just come see us later.
Opportunities, I basically say, keep your grades over 275 and then come see.
And then you come back. Your materials brag about the endowment being now, I guess, 1.2
nearly 1.3
billion. I asked somebody connected with the university about you, and he said, "Oh my God, that guy's a prolific fundraiser." That was the first thing that they said about you. And I imagine that the challenge of raising money for SMU, there are a lot of good causes out there. There's a finite amount of money. It doesn't seem that way sometimes, but there's a finite amount of money out there. That's probably, at least in part, what makes it possible for you to have access to these funds for financial aid and to do many other things on campus too.
Right. It's hard to say that 1.3 billion is is not that high. But in higher education, if you look at Vanderbilt, Notre Dame, Emory.
Yeah, it's an arms race,
places,
isn't it? Yeah.
Well, their endowments are 3 to 5 times more. And so we're having to work very hard to compete at that level as the endowment is building up, and it is.
But you've doubled it in 15 years, is that right?
Yeah, we've nearly tripled it.
Or tripled it in 15 years, yeah. Well, that's something.
But yeah. I certainly like it tripled more than I did.
Don't have to talk about Vanderbilt. We can just say that's good. We can accept and acknowledge that that's good.
And so all of the work we do, and Brad Cheeves, of course, and his staff constantly are working with this. We try to get a lot of what we call current endowment, which simply means an annual fund kind of scholarship. So rather than asking somebody to endow it, well, then when you do it for 4 years while that student's in here.
Right.
And we've had a lot of success with that. And that helps get students and also helps us in general make sure that our enrollment is diverse. Because if Texas is greater and greater in terms of the percentage of minority enrollment and so on, and opportunity, it's important for SMU to reflect that. If we train leaders for this part of the world, then we need to be training Hispanic leaders, African American leaders.
Well, let's go there. Let's go to the student population. That's kind of the next piece of this, which is access. You mentioned 25%, maybe a click above 25% is minority enrollment. As a percentage of the overall population of the state right now, we're at below 50% Anglo. We're in what's called a minority-majority status, soon to be Latino majority. Do you think SMU has an obligation for its student body to reflect the overall population of the state of Texas? Are you doing enough to reflect the population trends in the state of Texas?
Well, I think in answering that question, you'd have to take into consideration percentages that are college going, or those that have taken the high school curriculum that would make them admissible to a school like SMU.
Yeah.
And so I don't think
this is still an elite or competitive academic environment.
Yeah, you're still very much. I mean, if our average SAT is 1,300 this year, and it'll go up to probably.
Which, as you said, has gone up, right?
It'll probably go up to 1,320 next year. We had 14,000 apps for those 1,400 positions last year. We'll probably have 15 or more this year.
Right.
So we're really in a trajectory. But whereas we don't have the mandate that you might have for a state institution to be totally reflective, we still think it's important to be very much involved in that question and that solution.
Yeah.
Because what we try to train are leaders for various areas, even in engineering. You know, we found out 5 years after an SMU engineer leaves, he or she is 80% of the time in a management or leadership role. So that changed our curriculum in terms of really getting our students ready for what they're going to be doing. And so the same way when it comes to ethnic diversity, you know, the Methodist tradition of SMU and the speed at which, relative to the rest of the world, maybe not all that high, but relative to Texas was very early in integration and so on, is a tradition that we have. But mainly it's, I think it's just practical. If you're going to provide the leaders for a particular area, then you need to be diverse, because if you're not, those that you're training are handicapped, plus they're not going to be reflective of all the opportunities they have. I tell students all the time that diversity is important for a lot of reasons, but one of the important reasons is because the students themselves, whether they're Hispanic, African American, Anglo, Indian, doesn't matter what, they've got to learn to work together. And if they can't learn to work together at a university, where are they going to learn to work together? Because whether it's your company or anybody else's, I mean, it is incredible how much diversity there is in the workplace. And if we ever get our immigration laws set up to where more of our PhD students can stay here, it will even be more.
So, sorry, was it a deliberate decision on the part of the university to benchmark that minority enrollment? I mean, now I say 25, 26%. Was that a goal that you had to work toward and you've achieved it? Do you have a goal beyond that, or is this just going to change organically over time?
I think it changes organically. We didn't sit down and say, okay, we've got a 25% quota.
Yeah.
You know, we just have basically worked with well-qualified minority students, or really students from any walk of life or ethnicity, to have the opportunity to come.
So the admissions department works very hard to go into high schools where the very best students are likely.
We have a DISD plan in which we work very, very hard. Frankly, the 10% rule has been helpful to us.
Because?
Because that means that there are fewer slots just across the board at like Texas and Texas A&M, of very top students from different high schools. So you can go into any particular high school and know that some of them, we have like the Dallas High School scholarship funds that
Right.
Bob Dedman. So we're going to get the top 4 there, period. But most places, we've got a real good chance to get very good students who may have thought that they wanted to go to Texas or Texas.
But they can't get in now.
But maybe they can't get in
Yeah.
now, and so we get a chance to look at them in a very important way.
You mentioned 700 from in-state and 700 from out-of-state. Is that also by fiat? Does that?
That's by plan.
Yeah. So I mean, so you basically said we've dictated that we're going to do half in and half out.
Well, and the reason is you want to be a national university. If we just wanted to be a regional school,
Yeah.
then we wouldn't care where they come from. And so our 700 has been made up, California's number 1 nearly every year.
Yep.
We could have them all Californian if we wanted them. But Florida is second, usually Illinois, Missouri, in that area, one of those two. Now, if you take the Chrysler Building and do a 50-mile radius around it, it's number 4 or 5.
Is that right?
If you take the Washington Monument and do 50 miles around it to Maryland, Virginia, and all that, you'll be in probably 7th, 8th, something like
What's
that.
the
So
yeah.
we work hard at recruiting kids from around the country, just as we're moving toward being more and more national.
What's the selling proposition to a kid from California or New York or Maryland why they should come to SMU, as opposed to, as you said, Vanderbilt or Duke or any number of other schools that SMU probably considers to be its peers in this universe?
Well, we obviously work very hard and sell the idea of a faculty-student ratio of 1 to 12. Theirs is not far from that, too.
Yep.
But one of the things that we think is a real difference is Dallas. And so Dallas is very much a part of what we do and what we sell.
Yeah.
Because Dallas is so encompassing of the opportunities that are here, to where, you know, you can major in art history and you can do an internship in one of a, you know, large number of museums.
Right.
To where students who have opportunity for internships just have a leg up on a lot of others.
Yep.
And so many get their first job here, or at least get the kind of experience that is required to be able to get one of those. And plus, the campus itself, you know, the fact that I'm the 10th president, and the fact that none has gone off the reservation relative to the architecture, the style, the consistency.
Yeah, everybody's marching in the same
And
line.
so
right?
when people come on, it has curb appeal. I mean, as soon as a student
Well,
drives
right,
up,
from a real estate standpoint.
three
that's
quarters
right, yeah.
of the students who visit us apply. And so, you know, whenever we're out somewhere, Barry and I were in Chicago last week, and they bring people in, prospective students as well as donors and alumni, and I just say, visit the campus.
Come see the campus.
You'll know real quickly
Right.
where, because that tells them it's visually what they would expect. The academic programming will sell them.
Right.
And the opportunity to be very much involved early on with whatever they want to do
Yeah.
is a big selling point.
Let me ask you about applications, admits, and enrollment over 10 years. I was interested to go back and look at the statistics. You mentioned 15,000 apps last year. That's a little higher than I thought based on what I read, but let's take your number as the number. If I go back to 03, based on the stats I saw, the number of applications was about half that, maybe even a little bit less than half that. The admits, say in 03, were about 4,000. The admits, at least as far as 2012, I can see were 6,000. But in each case, 10 years ago and now, the enrollment's about 1,400.
Right.
It stayed basically the same. The 11,000 all-in number that you mentioned for enrollment is about the same.
Right.
Talk about that. So is it a conscious decision to just keep the campus this same size?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We
Talk
have
about
had,
that.
I've been here 18 years, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it was basically thought right at the end of Ken Pye's term that we ought to work toward a stable enrollment. And when I got here, I absolutely believe that. And the theme has been, we don't want to be bigger, we want to be better. And so we have stayed the same. And so whether you've got 5,000 applications or 15,000, the size is going to be about the same. And again, trying to increase quality rather than increasing size has really been important. We've had many opportunities just to get bigger.
Yeah.
But that's really not our role. I think what Dallas and what Texas and the country needs is a better SMU, not a bigger SMU.
But it looks to me that the number of applications that you're receiving is going up precipitously. The number of admits has gone up some, But again, same size, which means basically you're able to cherry pick the very best from the group that applies and hope that the yield from the admits to the enrollment is actually really good.
The yield goes down as your competition gets higher.
Yeah.
When we started out at about 1140, let's say, for average SAT, then most of your competition, most of our applications were regional.
Yeah.
Some from California. We've always had a lot from Illinois and Missouri, just up and down that part of the world. And so as a result, you're competing more often than not with TCU and Baylor and other schools that are around. But when we started taking off, we have what we call 12 cohort schools, which is TCU, Baylor, schools like that.
Well, just name them. Can you name them all?
And then, no, I can't name them all. And then 12.
I didn't tell you that would be on the test. Let's
right.
acknowledge, right? Okay.
I could do it, but it's a waste of time. And
Yeah.
12 aspirational ones.
Yeah.
And so now that we're in the aspirational ones, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some.
Yeah.
And so the number that say yes has gone down a little bit because they're saying, when they do say no to us, then they're saying yes to Vanderbilt or USC or something like that, rather than something local. And so as a result, we knew from our own work that was going to be the case.
Yep.
And so it reflects it. We're in a different competitive environment, and it's tougher because the number of students in the cohort we're looking for is not growing. It is not growing. Mm-hmm. The number in the lower end of the curve is, well, do the audience right, lower end of the curve is growing. But if you look at the number of students that have SATs of 1,200 and above, it's not growing.
Basically the same. Yeah.
It's not growing.
Yeah.
So we're all fighting over the same group of students. And as you move up, like we've had with an average going from 1,150 to 1,300, then along that normal curve, it just moves more and more that way. So you're really working on fewer all the time. So your national footprint has to get bigger.
Right.
And that's what we basically have been working on. And Paul Ludden with Stephanie DePaul and our people in the academic areas and admission have really done a very good job of expanding our footprint. If we were known everywhere in the country, I'd say, boy, we're in for a tough time to keep moving up.
Yeah.
But there are just a lot of places that people are just learning about us. The Bush Presidential Center, no matter what people's politics was,
Right.
last spring gave us an incredible...
All of a sudden, the world's eyes. Well, I'll ask you about that in a second. I'm very curious about that. So SMU's rankings nationally.
Yeah.
So the statistic I've heard thrown around is you're in the top quarter of national universities. Is that good enough?
Heavens, no.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, the university is talking about how we're in the top quarter, and I thought, that doesn't seem, I don't do math because I'm a journalist, but I can do that math. If you go down to the 25%, that's about a C.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, we got, we were at 80. U.S. News & World Report's one of the few all-encompassing ones, and everybody loves to hate it, and we do too.
Picks on them and all that.
Yeah, but if we move up, they're great. If we don't,
then they're idiots. That's right. Yeah, of course.
and so this year they're idiots. But nevertheless, because we didn't move up, we started at 87th.
Right.
And now we're 58, 60 in that range.
Yeah.
And so our goal is to be within the top 50. Everybody's goal in the top 50 is to stay in the top 50 and move
Which
up.
you have to sharp elbows
So
in
you
the top
got to
50.
elbow somebody out.
Is the problem the
that's
rankings or is the problem you?
Well, the challenge is SMU. These rankings, and I think anyone would tell you, you have a hard time if you're in the middle of the country to getting the same kind of respect that you would get if you were in the Northeast or if you were on the West Coast.
You believe in the flyover country theory of media bias, right?
Rice, for example, would probably be in the top 10 if they were on the East Coast.
You think so?
Same thing. Just pick them up, move them there.
Right.
Would probably be in the top 10. I think they get about a 7 to 8 point bias against them for where they are.
Yeah.
And so I think we get some of that too, and that's why we work so hard in the Northeast and why we work the West Coast. Patty LaSalle here heads up our public affairs area, and we constantly work to place articles, faculty expertise, those kinds of things in the Northeast paper. And so getting known is a big issue, and that's why I'm optimistic about our continuing to be able to move up because, again, people are just discovering us in some parts of the country.
It's about the brand as much as it is about the product.
So Duke or some of the others that have a brand that is, well known,
Yeah.
then everybody around kind of knows who they are.
Yep.
Whereas in our situation, we're still expanding those horizons. And so I'm very optimistic about it and love working on it. And I think everybody else loves working on it and believes that what we're working toward will happen. That 1,300 was a goal for 2015. We have a strategic plan that we really work with. And given our board is made up of successful people generally who
And
are
impatient.
in business,
Impatient. Right.
but who like numbers and who understands, what were the sales today?
Well, you got ahead of you beat your time frame.
We did.
Which is a good thing.
And we've put a lot of goals into numerical order so people can track them.
Right.
And that's been my colleagues in other university presidencies, when we did that in 2006, they said, "You are nuts. You're going to get hung by the very numbers."
You're setting yourself up, right? Yeah.
And I said, well, it's the only way to communicate to my people. And I believe they'll respond to it. And they have.
You mentioned the Bush Center. Let's talk about that. I know there was some controversy around the creation and the location of the Bush Center. You started very early. The anecdote I've heard many times is that as soon as President Bush was President Bush, you said, we need to get to work on this. This is the place it ought to be. And of course, you were successful in getting it. A bunch of people, for political reasons, were concerned about, is this the right thing for the campus to have? Obviously, it's been a great magnet. I mean, leaving the politics aside, that sort of standard consternation over politics abated after some time. It's been a big magnet, except for the last couple of weeks where it's been largely shut down. Now that it's going to get back open, I guess as soon as today, right?
Today, yes, open. I got an email from Alan Lowe. He's open for business.
It's open for business. What does that do as a practical matter? I mean, beyond the fact that people are coming to the campus to see that and they stay for you, and some people come to the campus because that's also here, right? What does it really do from a brand transformation standpoint to have a presidential center, library, museum here?
Well, I think it just raises your visibility. Even the first weekend it was open, we had people from all over the country, because Mark Langdale and I were over there greeting a lot of them, and they literally from Minnesota, California, they were from everywhere.
Right.
Many of them, most of them would have never come to our campus. There would have been no reason to.
Right.
But they do come. And
we're talking about average folks, and I suspect we're also talking about some very powerful and important international figures who will come as part of programming at the Bush Center. As they come to the LBJ Library in Austin, or they come to the George Bush Library in College Station, you get people who come through, and inadvertently they end up on your campus because the center happens to be here, and that's got to be good for the SMU community.
Yeah, it is. And we just feel like that our programs have worked out extremely well. Most of the concerns of people that maybe legitimate concerns have all been, I think, assuaged. And so as a result, it seems to be going extremely well. And even one of the critics, one of your friends from the New York Times, I'm sure, would come down and always
we all do know one another. That's true.
I know it. It's a small world. It's like any university president.
It is.
I probably know their kids and everything about them. But the
well, tell me what the Times did wrong. I'll report back to them.
Okay, do. Because they were constantly trying to talk to anybody that was against it, because they weren't particularly supportive of President Bush.
Right.
And this reporter kept saying, "Aren't you worried about this, that, and the other?" And I said, no, because I was a student at UT Austin when they announced the LBJ Library was coming there. And
you remember.
They nearly burned the place down.
What it was like.
There were all kinds of demonstrations.
And that's Austin, right?
And that's Austin. And now there'd be demonstrations if you tried to take it away.
Sure.
Because it goes from politics to history. And it would happen here very quickly. And I felt like it would, because I had that experience. And we have a few faculty who were there also during that period of time. And so I told the writer, he kept saying, but aren't you worried about what this will do for your reputation here, there, or the other? And of course, he was really talking from some of his readership standpoint. And I said, look, just get the letters in the right order. SMU.
That's all I care about,
and
right?
We'll deal with the outcome.
Yeah, of course, of course. What's the smartest thing you've done as president in 18 years? If you can be self-reflective.
The smartest thing?
What's the smartest thing you've done as president? Smartest act you've undertaken, or the smartest action you've taken? What's the best thing you've done, you think? And when you look back, you think, in these 18 years, this was the best decision I made?
Well, the Bush Library would have to be real high on that list, if not at the top, because there was nobody has even come close to having to go through what we went through to get it. because
Right.
all the lawsuits of some of the people
Right.
for the land, the competition was really tense.
Well, I can't take issue with that because obviously it's had an enormous effect on SMU, but I'm thinking more kind of internal to SMU, the institution. I mean, the Bush Center is obviously something that's been added on as a module significantly, not to diminish it. But from SMU's perspective.
I think the pervading decision was when I announced that we want to be a top 50 institution. You've got to have, as you know, in leadership, you've got to have one big vision that everything else can fit in. And it's got to be easy to understand. And it's got to be something that you can talk about and everybody can talk about. And motivational, aspirational, and all those sort of things. And so we're at 87, and we say that in 1997 that our goal is to be within the top 50. And it'll take several decades to get there, but that's what we've got to do. And so the Board of Trustees, I wouldn't trade my board for any board. And the Board of Trustees agreed to it, has been consistently working toward it, believe in it, believe it's important for SMU, believe it's important for Dallas or whatever else.
Right.
And that has been the one defining thing behind all this momentum. And as I mentioned before we got up here, the hardest thing to generate at a school is momentum. And coming off some negative publicity before that period of time, there just wasn't any. And so with the board's help to get that going, now we just can't let it go back in any ways or just get level. We've got to keep pedaling as hard as we can pedal.
So what's the biggest mistake you made? Something you'd like to have back?
Other than this interview?
Yes. I'll be the judge of that, sir. What's the biggest mistake you made?
Goodness, I don't even think in those terms. Anything I would tell you, I would later say, why in the world did I say
Why on
that?
earth did I answer that question? So,
Yeah. I really want.
Nothing
I mean, there are a lot of things you'd like to do over if you could do them
Well, tell
over.
me something you'd give. Let me have a do-over. What would be a do-over?
Yeah, I can't think.
Can't think about that either. This may be one of those way homers where you think about it on the way home, right?
Right,
Then you just
right.
call me later and tell me.
I'll tell you what
We'll
it was.
tweet it.
But
Let
if
me
you're going to tweet it, I won't tell you.
Let me use that. I never should have said that. Let me use the balance of our time before we open it up for questions to ask you about college athletics, since you have been the co-chair of the Knight Commission and you obviously know your way around this subject. I want to ask you a general question and a specific question. Have we properly got the balance right on the academics and athletics piece? There is a lot of anxiety. There always has been. There always will be about whether universities regard the athletics piece properly calibrated alongside the academics piece.
In general, I think if you would take football particularly out of that equation, and maybe basketball, but particularly football, I'd say yes. But with that in the equation, there's still work to do, because there are so many people, I call them the pro fans, that really don't give a flip about your university.
They don't.
Or whether you've got a good business school, fine art school, or whether the kids that come through have a real degree or have a general studies degree, like some schools have put into place. They don't care.
Well, they're vicious.
They're mean.
And in fact, I can tell you specifically that your current quarterback used to be the quarterback at UT. They ran him out of town with pitchforks and torches out of Austin. And they were so mean to him particularly that it really was an eye-opener. Shouldn't be, but it was an eye-opener about how for a lot of the people who watch college football, they could give a rip about the university, as you say, and about the individual.
Yeah, and any of them that they do that to them, just send them our way.
Is that right? Because that's kind of worked out well for
Gilbert's
you,
worked
hasn't
out
it,
pretty
actually?
well for
Yes,
us,
yes, I agree. Yeah.
But the academic, we started on this, and I was chair of the President's Commission in 1991, where we pushed through the Prop 48, Prop 16, as they were called, propositions. And people were screaming about this is going to eliminate kids from inner city schools and so on. And our view was that students are pliable and schools can be pliable, and whatever the standard is, they'll meet. And of course, that's been shown to be true over and over. But even if the students have credit, sometimes they don't have, and in these poor academically leveled high schools, don't have what your kids would have from an Algebra 2 class or from a chemistry class or so. They may get half the book or something like that. And so you do have to have academic support services. And to me, the third rail in this whole thing has been majors, and it really bothers.
Talk about that.
It really bothers me that some schools have created some degrees that really don't have any upper division courses in them, and you would think that those institutions would have prevented that from happening.
Do you think they're doing it purely so their athletes can say
they're eligible?
Yeah.
Because now with the APR, Academic Progress Report, you have to maintain a certain percentage of continuing eligibility at certain grade levels, or you lose what's called APR points. You lose those, and you eventually are not eligible for postseason play.
Right.
Bowls or NCAA basketball tournament or anything. And so that has made, the great thing about APR is that it has made schools really take notice of whether their kids, their athletes, are going to class, whether they're doing this, what they're supposed to be doing, where they're taking care of that.
Right.
One of the unintended consequences of it is a watering down of majors to where you have some, people say PE majors. PE majors, we don't have one, but PE majors are fine majors because they get people ready to do all of these degrees and various things like that, or jobs in rec centers.
Yep.
If they go through a teaching certification, they can be a coach and those kinds of things. And so those are jobs that get them there. And by the way, the human physiology parts of those gets pretty difficult too. But it's the ones that are just a smorgasbord of lower division courses really maintained. And if you watch the majors when you're watching a collegiate football game and it says Joe Schmo from wherever, New Boston, Texas, my hometown. And if it says they're majors and it says general studies, that's...
So why can't and why shouldn't the NCAA get into this conversation in a big way and bust those schools for falsifying academic
Well, that's a wrong term. They're not falsifying it.
Well, but Mr. President, what is it then if it's not?
It's getting an academic credential that is not at a level or of a level of quality or of focus that easily allows them a path, because 95% of them are not going to get.
You don't think so? You think rather than being a false academic credit, it's more of an illegitimate, or in your mind, what would be more of an illegitimate academic?
An inadequate.
Inadequate.
Inadequate one would be a better term.
But can the NCAA police that?
No,
honestly,
they can't. No, the curriculum is always the purview of the faculty on that campus and the administration on that campus, and so the NCAA really can't do anything. You can say how many units you're going to have, but it really can't say what the...
And the NCAA can theoretically have a point of view about how many of your student athletes are graduating?
Well, graduation's a part of that APR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they just can't comment on the substance of the academic.
Well, they can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Let me ask you about...
Other than the bully pulpit.
Which is not insignificant if they use it, right. So let me ask you about a more concrete thing that there has been some discussion around about, and that's paying college athletes. The Johnny Manziel situation, which is obviously not resolved, has focused attention on this question of, do we regard our student athletes properly in terms of how they're or not compensated? Should there be opportunity? And you've had a lot of college athletes of late have come forward and said, look, the universities are making a ton of money as a result of these athletic programs, college football, what have you, and this shouldn't the students in some way be compensated? Well, in fact, coaches, Mack Brown said before the season began, he told ESPN, the University of Texas is making hundreds of millions of dollars annually on college football. It's crazy that we're not paying these kids. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not for paying them, and because I think it totally changes the model. Unfortunately, I wish there was a minor league for football. Because if a student does not want to go to college in basketball, baseball, or anything else, there's a minor league that they can go to, and some go to Europe or various other things if they can't make the minor league team here in basketball. But I'm not for paying them. I think though that you said what our price is, so 4 times $58,000. That's significant in terms of what we're making available to those student athletes. I do think that doing things like cost of attendance, which is a federal calculation, that make sure that there is some funding. Student athletes right now can get a Pell if they're from a needy family on top of their scholarship. So they do have some funding. I think there are a few things like creating trust funds that would help in students to complete education or to deal with various other things that help move them along after they've been out, even if they did go pro and then tore up a knee and hadn't saved a dime. That sometimes bring a focus of the mind to needing education when that occurs. And so there are those kinds of things I think that can help, even if it's health care or various other things that can help afterwards that are being discussed that I think are worth looking at. And certainly the cost of attendance I think is fine. But the idea of just paying a salary, I am not for that at all.
Yeah, and so from the perspective of your co-chairmanship of the Knight Commission, what is the big issue then as it relates to academics and athletics or the college athletic experience that should be our focus next?
Well, I think that we just put out last week sort of a dashboard indicator from a financial standpoint, so on, that compares academics and athletics.
Yeah.
And I think that's been very helpful and will be even more helpful. But I think that it's important right now that the structure of the NCAA gets settled, because the NCAA has been vilified as being this demon out there, and we all have our problems. But as I always say, it is we. I mean, it's an association. We pay dues. You know, we do all these things, and it's not the federal government. It's the 800-plus universities that are members of it.
Yeah.
Occasionally, we have to remind them that they are an association. They're not an empire. But nevertheless, if you take out the enforcement part, which nobody wants but everybody needs, their competitors need. You know, everybody is pure as anything, but, you know.
The problem is everybody
the other
else.
Coaches
the other
that
guy,
do all
right,
that.
yeah.
And so if you take that part out, then it's how do you best run? And the level playing field has been a philosophy for each of the subdivisions forever, like 1A. Everybody's to have the same rules. You can't, if there's a limit for the football magazine of 32 pages, then Texas, which could give you 1,000 pages, and Appalachian State, which might could give you 5, both have to do 32. And so as that is now breaking down, exactly how to hold some unity within the movement is the issue. I spoke to the Division 1A athletic directors 3 or 4 weeks ago in their annual meeting out here at the airport.
Yeah.
And basically what they wanted me to talk about were the common values that got everybody into intercollegiate athletics to begin with, and how those values need to help us get to the next stage, which is basically letting those schools that have $1 gazillion have more freedom to do $1,000
page program,
or whatever else, but within some limits, not to eliminate the amateur model that athletics exists on, and so on. So all of that, I think, is something that has got to be worked out. In the Knight Commission, we're rubbing our temples on that just like anybody else, but we've come up with what we think are some good suggestions, and the NCAA is starting to do it. And I think what you're going to see is in January at the convention, there'll be some things passed on to the board of directors, which will approve them in April, and the membership will vote on it next August. So I think 14 is sort of the year.
It's going to be a big year.
That all is going to come about.
Got it. Well, I want to thank you, President Turner, again for your hospitality today and for enduring this for the last while ago. President Turner, thank you very much.